Good afternoon, this is Rodney Phillips, i.e. Grandpa, at Grandpa's Farm here in Loudon, New Hampshire. Today is Friday, August 13th, and we're getting ready for Christmas, believe it or not. Today we're out in our balsam firs, and we're going to be doing some pruning and some shearing, some training, correcting a number of things that we have to do to the trees during the summer months, and after the new growth is hardened off. And so I want to give you a little tour as to what we do, a number of things, and we'll take them one at a time. And the first thing we're going to do is do some pruning. And that entails cutting back the top, the leaders, getting rid of multiple leaders, that kind of thing. So let's go to our first tree and we'll see what we can do to make any corrections or just do some basic pruning. This tree here is a balsam fir. It's been planted four years ago, I believe. We planted this tree. Most of our best stock comes from Bosch's Country View Nursery in Michigan. They're very reliable transplant source. Our transplants come, typically we like to get them anywhere from about a foot to 20 inches in height. And that gets them a really good start. They've been grown in the ground. They're either 3-2s or 2-2s, so they're either in a transplant on a seed bed for 2 years, and then they're in a transplant bed for 2 more years, and then finally they dig them up in the spring and they ship them to us based on how many we order. So that's how we get them. This tree, again, has been in the ground around 4 years. So let's take a look at this tree here. This tree, it's growing very well. It's excellent. This year we're getting a lot of multiple leaders. I'm not sure. I'm working on my pruning, and I'm not sure if that's it or it's just a good year for multiple leaders. But we have 2 leaders here. We don't want multiple leaders. You only want 1 star in your tree, or angel. So we're going to take that one out of there. We pick the best one, and we just get rid of the other one. The other issue we have sometimes is we have these other things coming up here, these other shoots. They're coming from here, but they're wanting to start off as leaders. They're aspiring leaders, and we don't want those. So what we're going to do is we're going to snip that back to here. Same thing over here. We'll snip that back to there, and this will allow everything to fill in, encourage more growth in here. The other thing we need to do is we don't want that leader just to take off and the tree become tall without filling in. So you're looking for 10 to 12 inches of growth a year, but you have to look at the tree overall and determine what you need to do with that tree. This tree is not too bad. You can see it's got some sort of shape here. In the end, we're going to be shearing it, and I'll show you that. But what we're going to do, I want to take a look at this tree, and I'm going to imagine a line. So I'm going to imagine this line going up here, and I'm going to take this leader and I'm going to cut it back to here. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these top whorls. So every group of branches is called a whorl. And so what we're going to do is we're going to snip these guys back to here. And now what that gives me is it gives me some line to use when I'm shearing. So I'll take and I'll shear this thing here. And I'm going to keep that line going. Even though there might not be anything down low here to shear, I'm going to keep that line because what I want to do is I want to encourage that growth. I don't want to take anything off the bottom. I want to encourage that growth. So let's, I'm going to put my snips away here, and I'm going to go get my, my shearing device. Now, some people use knives to shear. They're extremely sharp. They're anywhere from 18 inches, couple feet. Very, very sharp. You have to really wear chaps, or you can literally slice your leg up pretty well. But I've turned to using a different device, and I'll show that to you now. All right, we're back with the same tree that we just pruned the leader and the top whorl. I have been using this device here. It's battery operated. There's a battery pack here, and there's a lead which goes to this motor here. There's a trigger, and then there's the blade here. This is a brush blade, a very typical brush blade. If some people own brush saws, and you sharpen it here. These 4 points, and these are just guards to keep it up off the ground and from hitting larger things like rocks. But all it takes to turn this on is this trigger, and then it whirls and it goes around. Again, back to what I commented on before, we want to take this and use this imaginary line, and we're gonna shear this tree. The reason I like this, just as a comment, the reason I like this is because I can stand back away from the tree. If I'm using a knife, I'm up fairly close. But with this, I can stand back quite a ways, and I can see that imaginary line, and it helps me do a better job shearing, I believe. So let's shear this tree. Again, this imaginary line, we want to keep this all the way around. There we go. I didn't take off much down below, but I did around here. That limits the growth here, and is going to encourage more growth down below here. So that's how I sheared the tree. So it's two steps. It's the pruning of the leader and the top whorl or two, and then shearing of the rest of the tree itself. Typically what I do is I go through and I'll prune maybe 400 or 500 trees, and then I'll go through and I can usually get 300 to 400 trees out of a charge on this, depending on how large they are. So that's how that works. Let's move on to something else now. This is another young tree. It's been in the ground 3 years. There's a lot of complexity here. There's a lot going on here. So let's just bring it closer so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's the leader from here's where we pruned it last year, right in here. That's where we pruned it. And we got a leader here, and we got other competing leaders here. And then we got this one off the side. So I cut this one, I pruned this one off here last year. And yet this year, this one's aspiring to be a leader. You know, it's taller than the other leaders, but it's not where we want it. It's not in the center. It's not what we want. So we are going to prune out this, a couple of these, and see what and then we'll shear it, and we'll see where we end up. So let's pull you back a little bit. All right. So, like I said, we're going to get rid of, we're going to shorten this one up, get rid of this one in the middle here. Then what we're going to do is, we're going to decide which one we want to be the leader. And I guess I'm just going to go with this tallest one. It's fine. It's a good, healthy one. It's got a lot of buds on it. We'll shorten these right up. Okay? And then remember, we want to kind of prune that top whorl so we have our imaginary line all the way around. So let's now shear this one and see what we can come up with. Okay, let's shear this. All right. So again, our imaginary line, doesn't matter what's there. If anything's there, we're just going to keep that imaginary line. Not going to do any more. We're going to be really conservative with this one. We want it to fill in, and we kind of like this shape here, this line. We'll let it work for the next few years and see what we come up with as far as a tree. Another thing that we have to do occasionally is train leaders. Most of our leaders come out pretty straight. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're crooked, and so we can optionally help train them. So we have bamboo. This is a 2-foot piece and a 4-foot piece, and I'm going to use a 4-foot piece. I'll show you why. I want to use this bamboo as a guide, as a support for this leader. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a taping machine, and I'm going to stick this right in the ground. And then I'm going to go around this, pull another piece out. And just like that, we have a leader now which is straight. It's still hardening off, so this fall, give it a 6 or 8 weeks, I'll come back and I'll probably pull these out for the winter, and they should be good to go for next year for the new growth. But that's one way that we can help train leaders if they aren't as straight as we'd like. Sometimes birds break them off. It's a wonderful thing. You wouldn't think birds would hurt Christmas trees, but they actually do. I don't have much damage down here in the balsams, but up in the spruces, they break the leaders off a lot. And so basically you have no place to put your star or your angel. And so I might lose a year or two on that tree unless I can find another branch to train up just like this. And so what I might do is take one of the side whorl shoots, and I might cut the others back and bend it up and use bamboo to encourage it to be the new leader. And so that's sometimes what we have to do. So birds aren't always your friend in Christmas trees. They're sometimes they can hurt your trees, but for the most part, especially down here in the balsams, we haven't had much trouble with them. So that's training up a leader. So I'm pruning along, and I find another really good example of a tree that needs some help, some training. So let's take a look at this tree right here. Here's where I pruned it last year. It's got great growth, obviously. But two of them really want to be the leader, and they're not straight. So I've got to figure out which one I want to be the leader. I guess I'm going to pick this one over here. So this one's going. That's gone. And looking at this tree, I don't really want it to grow all that much. It needs to fill in. So what I want to do is I want to train this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to clip these back here. Kind of doing the shearing at the same time. It's a small tree. And then I'm going to take my piece of bamboo in my taping machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 4-footer on this one because I want some sturdiness on this this thing here. So I am going to, I'm not going to leave it this long, but let's get it tied up. So I'm going to tape it here. Sometimes this taping machine, you got to be gentle, all right? And then tape it again here. Here. All right. Let's see if we can tighten it up a little bit. All right, so got it taped up, but I'm not going to leave it that long because here's kind of the taper that I want to leave with it. So I'm gonna nip this thing right here, and I'm hoping that this bud right here takes over. There's a bud opposite, something I'm trying. I just picked that bud off. It was on the opposite side. So there's one dominant bud. There's no more until you get down to 2.5 inches. So let's see what this does. Again, I went with a 4-footer just to give it some, I'm going to push it down into the ground, and there we go. Let's see if we can leave it there and see what it does. We'll know next year, won't we? Let's take a look at this tree now. Let's take a look at what happened last year where I pruned it and what's gone on so far this year. Last year, I pruned down to here. So this was the leader that I pruned off last year. I pruned it off right here. One thing I'm working on this year is trying to pick a bud to prune down to in my leaders. So, for example, these are all buds right here. All these are buds that if I left them will develop small branches next year, just like this here. I suspect last year that I left a bunch of buds for some reason. So I got a leader, and then I got another whorl right below it. It's okay. It's actually probably a good pruning, but what we see is it hasn't filled in here very well. So I'm gonna slow this one down a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is, again, looking at my line here, I want this thing. I'm not gonna let it grow any bigger than this. I'm gonna take off a lot. So let's take this off. It's not my 10 to 12 inches. In fact, I'm taking off about 20 inches here. There's a lot of leader here, and you can see all the buds. But I want to sacrifice that leader. I want to slow the tree down so that I can get it to fill in. So what I'm going to do is, again, looking at my line, I'm gonna slow this thing down so that this fills in, and I'm gonna take this line here. So I'm gonna do this. Now, I've only taken about 6 inches here of the leader that grew from here to here this year. So it was like a over 2 foot leader. I cut it down significantly because I want this to fill in. I don't want it to get too tall and be kind of sparse in one area. So that's how I'm going to encourage this to fill in. So now what I can do is I'm going to go back to my shearing. So I'm going to plug in my shearer here, my saw. And again, I'm going to prune out along this imaginary line. So let's do that. All right, there we go. So I stand back and look at that. I've kept this line here all the way around, and I'm hoping that this will fill in here over the next year. And there's a lot of buds. There's a lot of buds right in here. So I suspect it will. In fact, let me pull the camera closer, and I can show you all those buds that we hope will fill in next year. So let's do that. Okay, so all these branches have buds on them, right here. So there's buds in here, there's buds in here, there's buds all through here, on the ends, here. So there's a lot of buds in there, and we are hoping that it'll fill in next year. And when I come through next year and prune and shear it again, I'm going to allow it, hopefully, to get at least about 7 feet. It all depends on how this fills in, but only time will tell. So we'll come back next year in probably August, late July, probably early August of 2022, and see what happens. All right, let's take one final example. This tree's a little troublesome. You notice in here, this is where I pruned the leader last year. I'm not sure why, but these buds in here didn't take off. One down below did. The leader's kind of So let's see what we can do with it. We're gonna prune these down, and we're gonna let this one just take over as the leader. We'll have to see how it does. I'm not sure how it's gonna do. It'll be fine in the end, but you know, every just like a child, every tree is a challenge. So let's see what we can do with this one. So let's. I think we're just gonna stick with this one as our leader. Yeah, sometimes you don't have much of a choice. It is what it is, so let's see what happens. We're going to stick with that one there. So let's shear this one up. So grab my tool here for shearing. And again, that imaginary line is super important. How's that look? think that's all we're going to do. Hopefully this will fill in a little bit next year. We'll see how it does. So let's take a look at it. One final look. I think we're good. I don't think that putting any bamboo on this is going to help. I think it's pretty sturdy. We'll leave it as it is. Let me show you one final thing on the trees. As trees get a little larger, about 3 feet tall, one thing we do with them is we call it basal pruning. So if you notice down low here, you notice that there is, let me see if I can put it back down here. Okay. You notice the base here. All right, if you notice the base here, we have cut off all the branches up to about 8 inches. And what this allows us to do is prevent disease. So we get airflow underneath the tree. When we're mowing, we don't damage the bottom branches. When we're applying herbicides to the field, we don't, that herbicide will not come in contact with any, especially new growth, stuff that hasn't hardened off yet, you know, in late June, right straight through the end of July. So by basal pruning, there's a number of benefits for it, and all we do literally is go around and it's a lot of work. All you do is go around and you grab the tree and you cut all the branches off it, and once you've done it, you don't have to do it again. So this tree's good until it gets harvested by someone. Maybe you, who knows?